we are at Bombay, and we are going to go and discover my career in Bollywood on France 24.
This week, WLRI Fayol takes us to Mumbai. Our guest is a French actress based in India, the only one to make her mark on Bollywood. Kelki takes us on a stroll through the streets and museum corridors of India's biggest and wealthiest city, before embarking on a musical journey with film composer Naren Chandavarkar. Don't miss this special program on France 24 and France24.com.
And I'm the France 24 correspondent in New Delhi. I cover news from India and other countries in South Asia. Catch me on our news bulletins from the region.
Mandakini Gallert, one of the 200 France 24 correspondents around the world.
Welcome back to Live from Paris. I'm Mark Owen. These are the main world news headlines. Shutdown, day 34. Two bills aimed at India have failed. The Republican one would have seen Trump get nearly $6 billion of taxpayers' money to build that border wall. The Democrats' plan was to reopen while negotiations took place, and that equally was rejected. The Caracas stalemate. Venezuela has now two presidents this Thursday. The upstart Juan Guaido, who's been morally supported by Washington, among others, and Nicolas Maduro still in place and with the backing now of the Venezuelan army. Felix Tshisekedi is sworn in as president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. He's promised the release of all political prisoners and to tackle corruption. His election's been recognized now by the UN and the EU in spite of cries of fraud and manipulation from the losers. Thank you very much for being with us. The 34-day shutdown in the United States continues. A Republican bill has failed in the Senate, which would have granted President Trump the near $7 billion to build that border wall. A Democrat counter-bill suffered the same fate. That would have seen federal agencies reopen through to February the 8th, while a budget accord was negotiated. On the floor of the Congress, though, there's apparently hope that this double defeat might inspire more serious efforts to strike a compromise. I suppose the 800,000 federal workers who aren't getting paid can only hope for that. David Smith is in Washington, bureau chief of The Guardian. He joins us now for his analysis. David, good evening to you. Tell us what you make of this whole affair with these two bills. One, the Republican one voted down, the Democrat alternative voted down as well. It's a kind of tit-for-tat game, but for the people who aren't getting paid, it's far from that, is it?
That's right. I think it will just fuel that image of a dysfunctional government and a Washington in deadlock. We knew at the beginning of the day neither of these proposals had much hope of passing, so there was an air of grim inevitability about the voting today. Perhaps interestingly, it was actually the Democratic proposal that got more votes than the Republican one, even though the latter was supported by Donald Trump and included funding for his border wall, but the Democratic one got 2 extra votes, including glimmerings of light at the end of the tunnel, but I think still a long way to go to end this deadlock.
Indeed. I was going to ask you what happens next, but it seems like the answer shortly is that we don't know. But what we do know is that for the people who aren't getting paid, it's becoming tougher and tougher, isn't it?
That's right. I mean, I think the fact that these votes were held shows some willingness, and there were certainly some passionate speeches on the Senate floor today to resolve this, and Republicans who voted for both measures said their top priority is to get the government reopened. There's still discussions going on as we speak, I think, between the Senate leaders. Senator Lindsey Graham, confidant of the president, has proposed a continuing resolution. There does at least seem to be activity and a willingness. I think because, as you say, the pressure is really building now. Federal government workers standing in long lines for food banks, really feeling it really does seem to be reaching ahead, and I think even the Senate realizes something does have to be done.
David Smith in Washington, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Next day, live from Paris, the US is calling for a United Nations Security Council meeting on Venezuela. This follows a day this Thursday when the military confirmed a ministerial leak from 24 hours ago that the army is going to stand by President Nicolas Maduro. The United States was the first international voice to speak up in favor of the man who is seeking to replace Maduro. He is Juan Guaido, sworn himself in yesterday as the interim president. A number of countries then following the US and giving their support for this, including key regional powers, Brazil and Colombia. The military's position is crucial. Senior commanders have spoken out to confirm that they are standing by Maduro, Venezuela's military high command, throwing its weight behind Maduro then as Guaido presses that direct challenge to his authority with the backing of the US and key regional allies.
The government of the United States is pushing the right-wing opposition to take Venezuela to a state of insanity, of violence and chaos. They want to dismember this very nation and the very concept of the democratic state. They want to intervene in Venezuela, and the way they have chosen to intervene is by putting in a self-proclaimed de facto unconstitutional puppet as a president.
Maduro was speaking earlier at the Supreme Court in Caracas. International reaction, though, has been fairly categoric in its backing for the 35-year-old Juan Guaido. He represents a long-standing opposition to the self-styled Bolivarian socialism in Venezuela, which dates back to, obviously, the enter into leadership of Hugo Chavez, mentor and predecessor of the current president, Nicolas Maduro.
President to avoid the political crisis spiraling out of control.
What we hope is that dialogue can be possible and that we avoid an escalation that could lead to the kind of conflict that would be a total disaster for Venezuela and for the Venezuelan people and for the region.
Brussels and European nations also stopped short of recognizing Guaido, instead calling for new elections.
Things happened yesterday, and we have to keep working in the European Union to see what we do. But it is obvious that there will be contact with the Venezuelan regime. Do you think this can be done ignoring the reality? The reality is what it is, and we must work with it.
A message that was echoed by French President Emmanuel Macron, who called Maduro's re-election illegitimate and praised the courage of Venezuelans who had taken to the streets. A number of key allies are still backing Nicolas Maduro. In South America, these include Uruguay and Mexico, who are calling for more talks between the government and the opposition. Elsewhere, Russia warned the US against military intervention in Venezuela and said the attempted power grab was a violation of the basics and principles of international law. A similar line was taken by Turkey and China, with Beijing saying it opposes international interference in Venezuelan politics.
China supports the Venezuelan government's efforts to safeguard national sovereignty and stability. China always upholds the principles of non-interference in other nations' internal affairs and opposes external intervention in Venezuela.
The EU is hoping to set up an international contact group with South American nations in February that would seek talks between Maduro and the opposition.
Maduro's reaction to Donald Trump's decision to give US backing to Juan Guaido was to give American diplomatic staff 72 hours to leave Venezuela. In Paris this Thursday, our team spoke with Venezuela's ambassador. He voiced his backing for Maduro.
We talked about Juan Guaido being named the new president, but how? They choose a place. he is the real usurper, because President Maduro was constitutionally, legally, and legitimately elected by the Venezuelan people.
We're of course watching all developments from Caracas, so we'll bring you anything as it happens. Next, political prisoners will soon be released. This is the promise of the new president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. This Thursday, Felix Tshisekedi was sworn in, the country's first ever peaceful handover of power. Accusations of fraud and voting manipulation have been swept aside.
The Democratic Republic of Congo that we will build will not be a country of division, of hate, or of tribalism. We want a strong Congo, strong in its cultural diversity and its dedication to its motherland. A Congo focused on its development, peace, and security. A Congo for everyone, where everyone has their place.
Strong words from the new president of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Well, the challenges facing Felix Tshisekedi are massive. It's a resource-rich country whose people are among the most poor in the world. Conflict never seems to be too far from breaking out.
The Democratic Republic of Congo is sub-Saharan Africa's biggest country. It's nearly the size of Western Europe. The new president will face many challenges. Perhaps the biggest one will be to reduce poverty. Congo is mineral-rich. It's Africa's biggest copper producer and is home to nearly 2/3 of the world's cobalt. The two minerals account for 80% of the country's export revenue, according to the World Bank. But most Congolese don't benefit from these minerals. The UN says at least 63% of the country's more than 80 million people live on less than $2 a day. Another challenge for the new head of state will be to tackle corruption. The NGO Transparency International ranked the country 161 out of 180 in its 2017 Corruption Perceptions Index. The people of Eastern Congo hope the new president will also put an end to the presence of armed groups there, especially those from the Beni region, where hundreds have been killed these last 4 years.
In eastern Syria, the Syrian Democratic Forces are battling to recapture the last villages still held by the Islamic State group. Our reporter James Andre has this from on the ground.
Today we tried to get as close as possible to the front line, and we're actually currently just a few kilometers out, and what we did see is extensive destruction along the way. We crossed the city of Hajin, which was the last real city that was held by the Islamic State group, and there, well, there are pretty much no buildings still standing. Everything is totally destroyed. There are huge craters along the road, but we did see today some civilians coming back, discovering the state of their houses, trying to start to clear up the rubble. And then as we closed into this front line, well, we were told that we had to stop simply because, and that gives a good idea of the violence of the fighting here, simply because the Islamic State group was on a counter-offensive against the Syrian Democratic Forces, this Kurdish Arabic coalition that is backed by the international coalition. Well, indeed, they had to move back today in the face of a vicious attack by the Islamic State group, which had foot soldiers attacking this position, but also artillery and drones. The Islamic State group uses drones that they have modified so they can drop bombs on enemy positions, and this is but indeed they are completely encircled, but they're still fighting back. Most radical fighters that the group has.
James Andre and his team there in Syria. Next, some football news. Thierry Henry has been relieved of his managerial duties by AS Monaco. The French football legend took over as boss this season. The form of the team, though, has slumped under Henry's guidance. Are normally expected to be challenging for the title. Monaco are currently second bottom of Ligue 1. Well, it's reported that the former manager, Leonardo Jardim, has been contacted and is interested in making a return to the Principality. It's only 3.5 months since Monaco's Russian owners paid him off with €8 million to make way for Thierry Henry. Clearly something not working then between Henry and the Monaco players. It's worth noting that Henry was, of course, assistant coach of the Belgian national team during the World Cup. Belgium performing very well, and Henry's talents as a coach very much lauded at that time. So what goes on in the dressing room at Monaco, of course, is anybody's guess, but clearly it isn't working on the pitch, and AS Monaco have now relieved Thierry Henry of his duties. More on that in sport. Stay with us. We have an exclusive interview now with Gianni Infantino of FIFA, as talking to Georgia Calvin-Smith about a new scheme to help children through football.
Thanks very much for joining us for this episode of The Exclusive. I'm Georgia Calvin-Smith, and we are at the World Economic Forum in Davos, Switzerland, where today we'll be talking about food, football, and education. That is because UNESCO, the World Food Programme, and FIFA have banded together to create a programme aimed at breaking poor communities around the world out of cycles of deprivation. So to that end, they are going to be providing free school meals, and that is aimed at getting more kids into school, keeping them there for as long as possible, and also they'll be supporting teachers to make sure that the quality of education that these children receive sets them up for as best a future as possible. So to talk about how all of this is going to work, I'm very happy to say I'm joined by the president of FIFA, Gianni Infantino. Gianni, thanks so much for coming in to speak to us. Now, first of all, UNESCO.
It's a pleasure.
Pleasure is all ours and our viewers, I'm sure. So we've got UNESCO, yes. We have got the World Food Programme. We're used to them being involved in humanitarian affairs and development programs. And then we've got FIFA. How come you've joined the team?
Strange, right? It's strange because normally people associate FIFA with football, with the World Cup, with competitions, and it's not obvious at first sight that FIFA, being the football governing body of the world, has also, that's at least the way that I see it and the way that the new FIFA sees it, a social importance. Football is more than just a game, we know that, and we know that as FIFA we need to take our responsibilities, not only when it comes to the game itself, but also to our social role. And we want to play this responsibility at full, and that's why we are very happy and proud that we've been able to team up with UNESCO and the World Food Programme in this fantastic Football for Schools project that we are launching to put school education at the forefront of what we are doing.
So how are you going to do it? What does this programme specifically entail?
Well, it's a very challenging and very interesting programme that where we have partnered up with these two great organizations. We want to touch 700 million kids, boys and girls, all around the world, from the age of 6 to the age of 15, bringing to them not only footballs. We will flood the world with balls. We will send 11 million balls all around the world, but we will also present to the schools around the world football program, a football program which is part of the, or will be part of the school curriculums of primary schools and secondary schools all around the world, where actually the important element is not football skills, but life skills, taught through football. But you can speak also about violence, about drugs, about obesity, about many topics that can be brought to children through football.
So you mentioned the values of football.
Yes.
You came you were elected in 2016, and right after that huge scandal that still overshadows FIFA to many people around the world, and you made it very clear that what you wanted to do was present a new face for FIFA.
Yes.
Is this a useful PR opportunity, or is this linked in a more wider way to an illustration of a change in the values of the organization?
Definitely it is. It is changing the way we see our role. The role of FIFA, the way we see it, the way I see it as the FIFA president, certainly after the big scandal that happened a few years ago. Otherwise I would never have been elected FIFA president as well. But the new way we want to present ourselves is to take our role seriously. Our role is to organize competitions, to organize football, definitely, to develop football around the world. And for this, we are already investing 1.8 billion over a 4-year period for football development all around the world. Half of the world would have no football without the solidarity contributions that we give. But this is not enough, because football means so much to so many people around the world. And when we have been seeing what can we do, what can we take as our social theme, as our social responsibility part, we have found that education is really something that fits quite well with football, that is maybe not the priority of other bodies around the world, except for governments or governmental bodies. But we thought that, and studies show this as well, that when you speak about something that interests kids, they listen in a different way. And football is something that interests many kids around the world. So through football, we can, in cooperation with UNESCO, with World Food Programme, we can bring and teach some of these values to the children. This is part of the way we see our role. It's natural, it's normal. It's normal that we go beyond the simple football on the pitch, and that we try to do something for society, because we are part of society.
There's no doubt that the kids are going to be very excited about this, but part of the problem is oversight, because as much money that's going to be funneled into this program, how is there going to be some kind of guarantee that the local operators implementing this plan, this scheme, with all the best of intentions, actually deliver what is intended?
That's a very good question, and that's why we decided to team up with both UNESCO and World Food Programme, because they have the necessary networks and expertise in these areas. On our side, what we will contribute is the balls themselves, of course, but also the curriculum, the educational curriculum for the schools. And we will be helped in this by our own network, which is a network of 211 countries around the world, which are FIFA members, where we have our member associations with their staff, which will be part of putting this project into place. Now, of course, we will depend on governments, will depend on ministries of education, how much they buy in, and we will try to convince them. And from the first discussions we had with some heads of state and government, they are all very, very interested, and I'm sure that they will all be very engaged in this project.
And how are you selling it to governments? Is it a humanitarian program, or is it more like more an investment in their economic future?
It is a social program for us, which is probably a little bit of a mix between the humanitarian and the investment in the economic future. There is no doubt that football today has a social and an economic role, which goes again beyond the pitch. A good result on the pitch can change the whole mindset of a country. If they qualify, if they win a competition or whatever. I've been traveling to Africa very recently, to 9 countries in Africa, and And you could see, because there are some deciding games now to be played for the qualification to the African Cup of Nations, how the whole country is vibrating for football. And you can see that football can help in this respect, not only to make a country proud, but also to contribute to the education of the youth of this country.
But beyond these programs, what's required to make sure that there is development and opportunities for more vulnerable communities in developing countries is a stronger infrastructure? Is there any plans or programs in place by FIFA to support that more long-term approach to providing better opportunities to people and children?
Yes, well, we are providing opportunities to children, boys and girls, by the way, because we're investing a lot in women's and girls' football, which is growing incredibly fast and strong. And this is part of our football development program that we have, with infrastructures, with jobs as well, through professionalization of clubs, of teams, of organizations, even just the football federation itself. It has to organize itself, has to organize competitions. You need coaches, you need referees, you need, and all of this helps to give opportunities. Now, in addition to this, we think that football can send some strong messages as well, which can help children, the football players, not the administrators, not we, not us, but the players, the legends, men and women alike. They are idols to many kids. And when you bring one of these legends to a school to speak to children and to tell them, and I witnessed that, and it's really amazing, to tell them, you know, if I made it, you can make it. You might not become a professional player in Manchester United, but you can become a doctor or a policeman or a professor or whatever. Believe in yourself. And if a football legend is saying this to children, well, they believe it much more than if it is a teacher or anyone else, right? And we have to play this role, I think, seriously as FIFA, and we want to do that.
Thanks very much. That's a very inspiring way to end it. I really hope that the project rolls out as well as you hope it does. That kicks off over the summer of 2019, I believe.
Correct.
Yeah,
we will launch it this summer at the occasion of the Women's World Cup in France.
Brilliant. Well, we will be following it at France 24. Thanks very much, Gianni Infantino, President of FIFA. Thanks very much for joining us. That is all we have time for now for The Exclusive. Take care.
special event.
Brexit, a rise in populism and slowing economic growth. There's plenty for business and political leaders to discuss in Davos. But with the likes of Donald Trump and Emmanuel Macron staying away, can the World Economic Forum still draw the attention of the global elite? Join me all this week on France 24 to find out.
Watch events unfold on France 24 and France24.com.
Welcome back to Live from Paris. I'm Marco, and these are the headlines. Caracas stalemate. Venezuela has now two presidents. The upstart Juan Guaido, who's been morally supported by Washington, among other notable international names, and Nicolas Maduro still in place, but with the backing of the Venezuelan army. Shutdown day 34. Two bills aimed at ending it have failed. The Republican would have seen Trump get nearly $6 billion of taxpayers' money to build that border wall. The Democrats' plan was to reopen while negotiations were taking place, and that equally was rejected. Felix Tshisekedi sworn in as president of the DRC. He's promising release of all political prisoners and to tackle corruption. His election has now been recognised by the UN and the EU in spite of cries of fraud and manipulation from the losers. Thank you very much for being with us. The United States has called for a UN Security Council meeting on Venezuela. This follows a day this Thursday when the military confirmed a ministerial leak of last night that the army stands by President Maduro. The United States was the first international voice to speak up in favor of the man who seeks to replace Maduro. His name is Juan Guaido. He swore himself in on Thursday as Venezuela's interim president, and immediately a number of countries followed by giving their support for this, including key regional powers like Brazil and Colombia. The military's position is crucial. Senior commanders have spoken out to confirm that they stand by Maduro. Venezuela's military high command has also thrown its weight behind the president.
In a bid to reinforce his power as president, embattled Venezuelan leader Nicolas Maduro took to the stand at the Supreme Court on Thursday, denouncing once again Juan Guaido's move to declare himself interim president.
Juan Guaido assumed in the most informal, vulgar way that from that moment he was the president of the country. Who does he think he is? Is that constitutional?
Supreme Court judges pledged their unwavering support to the socialist leader, along with the country's influential army. Defense Minister Vladimir Padrino threw his weight behind the president, and 8 generals followed suit with messages broadcast on state television.
I warn the people of Venezuela that a coup is taking place against our institutions, against our democracy, against our constitution, against President Nicolas Maduro, legitimate president of the Bolivarian Republic of Venezuela.
Meanwhile, Venezuelans on the street are divided.
The country is sad because of what happened. There was looting, there were deaths in Caracas as well as the rest of the country. The vast majority of people do not recognize Nicolas Maduro as president. He's illegitimate.
The opposition knows that the president they've chosen, Guaido, is outside the law. We have a president already elected by the majority of Venezuelans.
Wednesday's mass protests were the biggest in Venezuela since a crackdown on anti-government demonstrations in 2017 that claimed the lives of 125 people. The opposition is now preparing fresh anti-Maduro rallies for the first week of February.
We, of course, watch very closely developments in Caracas. We'll bring you anything new as soon as we get it. Next, the 34-day shutdown in the United States is continuing. A Republican bill has failed in the U.S. Senate. It would have granted President Trump the near $7 billion